Last month, my son Jason and his wife Megan handed me a rent check for $2,400. I signed the receipt as their landlord, slipped it into my ledger and walked upstairs to my penthouse. A year before, that same building had been theirs, bought in cash with the proceeds from a fourplex I purchased with my own pension. They forged the deed, sold it out from under me, and thought they had gotten away with everything. The trail of revenge began with a dented tin recipe box my son tossed into a trash bag, and the 16 words my late husband had tucked inside it. I was 55 years old in the spring Bill died, and I had spent 32 years as a payroll clerk for the county school district. My whole professional life was built on spotting discrepancies in columns of numbers, on refusing to let a single cent go unaccounted for. That skill, that bone-deep comfort with financial detail, became the weapon I never knew I had. My husband Bill had been a building inspector for the city, a man who could walk into a room and see immediately which wall was load-bearing and which window would leak within a year. He taught me how to read a property survey, how to spot water damage behind fresh paint, and how to understand the difference between a quitclaim deed and a warranty deed. Those lessons had been his love language, poured into me across kitchen tables covered with blueprints and tax assessor maps. We had only one child, Jason, and raising him had been a careful project of sacrifice. We skipped vacations, drove used cars, and rolled every spare dollar into savings bonds and his college fund. When he graduated with a business degree and married Megan, a sharp-elbowed woman with a taste for coastal real estate, we thought our prudence had paid off. Bill had just been diagnosed with early-stage heart disease, so I took an early retirement, cashed out $110,000 from my pension plan after the actuarial reduction, and we bought a solid red brick fourplex on Meridian Street. The plan was straightforward and documented. Jason and Megan would live in the ground floor unit, manage the other 3 rentals, and send us the net income every month to supplement my reduced pension. Bill drew up a property management agreement with a local attorney, Martin Rourke, and we recorded the deed in both our names, joint tenants with right of survivorship. It was never a gift, and the paperwork made that crystal clear. The morning Bill collapsed. I was in the backyard. He had been standing on a stepladder, cleaning out the gutters and humming an old Glenn Miller tune. I heard a thump and found him on the grass, his face already grey. The paramedics did what they could, but a massive coronary took him before we reached the hospital. I spent the next 24 hours in a fog, making calls, signing release forms with a trembling hand. Jason and Megan arrived at the house that same evening, all hugs and tears and a casserole Megan set on the counter with the price sticker still on the foil. They took charge immediately. They insisted on handling the phone trees, informing relatives, picking out the urn, and arranging the memorial service. At the time, it felt like a blessing, the kind of support you hope your child will offer in a crisis. I was too shattered to notice the speed with which they inserted themselves into every practical detail. 2 days after the service, they started going through Bill's office. Jason said he wanted to help me get organized, to find life insurance policies and bank account numbers before anything got lost in the paperwork shuffle. I watched from the doorway as he tugged open the bottom drawer of Bill's old oak desk and pulled out a dented tin box stamped with faded violets. It was my grandmother's recipe box, repurposed decades ago to hold an accordion file of old tax returns. Jason flipped it open, glanced at the yellowed forms and laughed. "Mom, why did Dad keep such a mess? This is all junk. I'll toss it with the shred pile." He tossed it onto a heap of papers destined for the recycling bin. Megan, standing beside him in a crisp linen blouse that probably cost more than my first car, nodded. "We'll handle everything, Linda. You just rest." I nodded and let them lead me to the living room, where they set me up with a cup of tea and a blanket like an invalid. Half an hour later, while they were in the kitchen arguing with a caterer about the memorial reception bill, I slipped back to the office and retrieved the box. I told myself it was sentiment, a last piece of Bill's meticulous habits, something I could not bear to see discarded. I waited until midnight, when the house was still and I could hear Jason snoring in the guest room. I sat on the edge of my bed, the tin box open on my lap. The tax returns inside went back 7 years. I thumbed through them, letting the familiar feel of carbon receipts and bank statements ground me. At the very back, folded into a square no bigger than a postage stamp, was a sheet of memo paper from the Topaz Motel in Flagstaff, where we had spent our 10th anniversary. I unfolded it. Bill's handwriting, tight and slanted, covered the page. "Linda, if you're reading this, something happened to me. Jason and Megan forged our signatures on a gift deed for the fourplex 6 months ago. I discovered it when a quitclaim notice came in the mail. The building was sold 2 weeks after the recording for $320,000. They used the cash to buy a waterfront property on Harborview Lane. I was going to confront them. I was too slow. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. Do not trust them. The attorney who drew up our original agreement, Martin Rourke, knows some of this. Call him, save yourself. I read it 4 times, my chest tightening into a cold, dense knot. The Fourplex was gone. My $110,000, my pension, our entire retirement safety net, had been liquefied and turned into a condo while Bill's heart was giving out. And my son, my only child, had signed his father's name on a forged document and never once looked back. The note was dated 6 weeks before Bill died, which meant he had been carrying this knowledge, this terrible secret, all through his final doctor's appointments and silent dinners, trying to figure out how to protect me before his body gave out. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe family should never be allowed to weaponize your love against you. The next morning I was still sitting in the same chair, the note tucked inside my sleeve. Jason came in with coffee and a folder of papers. He had that gentle, concerned tone he must have practiced in the mirror. "Mom, you've been through so much. We want to make things easier for you. Megan and I think it's best if you sign over the house to us. We'll take care of the taxes, the maintenance, everything. You can move into our guest suite on Harborview. You won't have to worry about a thing. Dad would have wanted you taken care of." He slid a quitclaim deed across the table, already filled out, my name as grantor and his and Megan's as grantees. Then he added a durable power of attorney form, supposedly just for healthcare decisions, but the fine print granted them full authority over my financial accounts as well. I looked at him, my son, and I remembered the weight of him as a baby in my arms, the way he used to fall asleep clutching my thumb. I blinked slowly, let my hands tremble a little more than they already were, and I said, "I don't think I can make any decisions right now, honey. My head is so foggy. Could we talk about it next week?" He exchanged a glance with Megan, and she smiled, the corners of her mouth tight. "Of course, Linda, take all the time you need, but we really think you shouldn't be alone. Let's get you packed. We'll have the guest suite ready by tonight." They were going to move me into their building, the very building bought with the stolen proceeds under the guise of care. I saw the strategy clearly now. They needed me dependent, disoriented, and close enough to pressure daily. So I let them pack my bags while I played the part of the grieving widow, foggy and compliant. I clutched a tissue, asked them to repeat things twice, and apologized for being slow. All the while the note was against my wrist, a sharp reminder that grief was my best camouflage. I did not sign a single page. I promised to look things over when I felt stronger, and they accepted that because they thought they had time. Their waterfront building on Harborview Lane was a converted 1920s brick warehouse, split into 2 luxury units. The top floor was a sprawling penthouse with exposed beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbour, and a rooftop deck. The lower unit, the guest suite, was a 2-bedroom apartment with garden access. Megan had decorated it in sterile greys and chrome, the kind of style that looks like nobody lives there. They had paid $315,000 in cash. According to the public records, I would later pull from the county assessor's website, with the remaining $5,000 spent on a used ski boat that was already listing in its slip with a cracked hull. I moved into that lower unit, and from the very first night I began to watch. It took less than a week to notice the financial cracks. Jason, who supposedly ran a small property management company, spent his mornings on frantic phone calls in the courtyard, his voice rising and falling behind the boxwoods. I would sit in the garden with a cup of tea, pretending to read and listen. "I told you the payment would post by Friday. You can't call the note yet. We're restructuring." He used phrases like hard money lenders, balloon payments, and interest reserves, words I recognized from decades of balancing the school district's bond accounts. Megan would return from shopping trips with glossy bags from boutiques I knew charged $400 for a blouse, and within days, I'd see those same items listed on consignment sites with the tags still on. The property taxes on the Harborview building were delinquent. I found the final notice slipped under their penthouse door one afternoon and quietly took a photo with my phone before sliding it back exactly where it had fallen. A week later, I intercepted a certified letter from the county tax collector's office while Jason was out. It was a notice of intent to file a tax lien if the arrears, now over $11,000, were not paid within 30 days. I photographed that too. One evening, I heard them arguing in the penthouse above me, the sound carrying through an old heating vent that connected the 2 units. "If we can get the reverse mortgage on her house," Megan said, her voice sharp and brittle, "that's $200,000 free and clear. The bank won't look too close if we present the POA and the signed quitclaim. We just need her thumbprint and a notary. Jason's voice was lower, harder to hear, but I caught the phrase, get her declared incompetent if she keeps stalling. That night I sat in the dark kitchen of the guest suite and read Bill's note again. Then I made my first move. I walked to a drugstore 3 blocks away, bought a prepaid cell phone with cash, and called Martin Rourke from the parking lot. Martin was a compact man in his 60s with a voice like gravel, and a mind that organized evidence the way I organized ledgers. He had been Bill's attorney for 2 decades, handling everything from our wills to a property line dispute with a neighbor that Bill had won with a surveyor's pin, and Martin's meticulously drafted demand letter. He met me at a diner on the other side of town, a place with sticky vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the Nixon administration. I brought the note, and he brought a manila folder an inch thick. He spread the contents across the table while the waitress refilled our cups. Bill contacted me 6 weeks before he died, Martin said. He discovered the forged deed through a title alert he set up years ago. It was a simple thing, a service that sends a notification anytime a document is recorded against a property you own. He started gathering records immediately. I have the original deed with your signatures, the gift deed with the forgeries, and the closing statement from the sale. But to make a criminal case stick, we need the actual physical forged document from their files, the one they had notarized with a false ID. And we need proof they are currently trying to defraud you of your house. He paused, sipped his coffee, and added, Bill also placed a cloud on the title of the Fourplex before they sold it, a quiet title action based on his own affidavit of forgery. He filed it with the county recorder's office. That's why the title company might be liable, and it's why the buyer's title insurance is likely to trigger a claim. It's messy, but it gives us leverage. I told him about the reverse mortgage plan, the power of attorney they kept pushing, the quitclaim deed, the tax delinquency, and the word incompetent echoing through the vent. Martin nodded slowly, making notes on a legal pad. They're trying to make you the scapegoat for their entire financial collapse. If you sign that POA, they can strip everything, transfer your house into their names, and leave you holding the tax liability while they disappear. We need time, and we need the physical evidence from inside their property. Can you get into their office and photograph that forged gift deed, plus any documents tying them to the current scheme? I knew exactly where it would be. Living in the lower unit had given me access to the utility room that connected to the building's shared basement, where Jason kept a locked grey filing cabinet. I had seen it when I went down to check the water heater a few days after moving in. The cabinet was an old 2-drawer steel case, the kind with a simple wafer lock, the sort my father had taught me to open when I was a teenager. I told Martin I could do it. He looked at me for a long moment. You're a careful woman, Linda. Bill always said you were the sharpest knife in a drawer most people never open. I'll wait for your call. I waited for the right moment. The next opportunity came when Jason and Megan announced they were driving 3 hours to a boat show at the state fairgrounds to look for replacement parts for their leaking ski boat. They left at 8 in the morning on a Saturday, and I watched their taillights disappear before I went to my jewelry box. At the bottom, wrapped in a square of felt, was a small leather case containing a tension wrench and a hook pick, tools my father had given me when he taught me locksmithing as a summer hobby. He had run a small shop on the south side, and I had spent hours at his bench learning to feel the tumblers click. I hadn't used those tools in 30 years, but my hands remembered. I went down to the basement with a flashlight and a screwdriver just in case. The utility room was cold and smelled of damp concrete. The filing cabinet sat against the back wall, its grey paint chipped, and its lock a simple circle in the centre of the top drawer face. I knelt, inserted the tension wrench, and applied the lightest pressure. The wafer lock was a cheap thing, no security pins, no false gates. I slid the hook pick in, lifted each wafer with a gentle upward motion, and listened for the tiny click as each one set. It took less than 90 seconds. I felt the plug turn, and the drawer slid open on its rollers with a soft metallic hum. Inside, hanging in neatly labelled folders, were the originals of everything. The forged gift deed was in a clear plastic sleeve, dated 7 months earlier, bearing signatures purporting to be mine and Bill's. My forged signature slanted the wrong way, the loop on the L in Linda far too tight. Bill's signature was even worse, a clumsy approximation that no one who had seen his actual handwriting would ever believe. A notary stamp from a mobile service was affixed to the document, but the notary's commission number, when I looked it up later, traced back to an expired license and a woman who had left the state 2 years before the date on the stamp. Behind that folder was a loan application from a hard money lender called Bridge Rock Capital. using the penthouse as collateral at an interest rate of 18%, with a balloon payment due in 18 months. Next came a pile of credit card statements, 9 separate cards, totaling nearly $90,000 in unsecured debt. Then I found what I had really come for, a draft of a reverse mortgage contract on my house, filled out entirely except for the signature line. A sticky note on top read in Megan's neat handwriting, "Get Mom's SIG, notary in house Tuesday. Bring the POA and quitclaim. If she refuses, mention the psych eval." I photographed every page with my phone, taking care to capture the document edges, the notary stamp, the signatures, and the sticky note. I replaced everything exactly as I had found it, locked the cabinet, and slipped back upstairs. I spent the next hour quietly shredding old grocery lists in my own kitchen to steady my nerves, the rhythm of the shredder grounding me in the simple fact that I was now operating on my own timeline. Over the following 2 weeks, I fed information to Martin. He worked with a forensic accountant named Diane Kelso, a woman Bill had known from a fraud investigation at the city planning department years earlier. Diane was a wiry woman with reading glasses on a chain and the ability to reconstruct a financial trail from a single misplaced decimal. She traced the flows. The forged deed led to the sale of the Fourplex. The sale proceeds funded the cash purchase of the Harborview building, and the subsequent loans and credit card debt showed a couple living far beyond their means, while desperately trying to cover the gaps with more forgery. Martin also put me in touch with a compliance officer at First Regional Bank, where the reverse mortgage application had been submitted. The officer, a calm man named Gerald Okonkwo, confirmed that the application had been flagged internally for unusual activity, specifically the mismatch between the stated gift of the Fourplex and the simultaneous quitclaim attempt on my house. Gerald agreed to cooperate with the investigation and to have his security team prepare the bank's conference room for a controlled meeting. Martin told me we needed one final piece to make the criminal case airtight, an overt act of coercion, an attempt to force my signature under duress, ideally recorded. He asked if I could stall the notary appointment long enough for the investigators to be in position. That was the moment I knew I needed to test them, to see if any scrap of humanity remained beneath the surface of their greed. So on the Tuesday morning Megan had scheduled the notary, I staged a medical event. I had crushed a beta blocker tablet, one of the low-dose pills my doctor prescribed for occasional anxiety, and mixed it into my morning tea. I knew from a nurse friend years ago that a half-dose could slow your pulse and make your skin clammy without any real danger, a trick she had used when her own panic attacks made her faint. I waited until I heard footsteps in the penthouse kitchen above me. Then I climbed the stairs slowly, pausing every few steps to breathe heavily. I stumbled into their kitchen, clutching my chest, and let myself fall onto the tile floor near the breakfast table, where Jason had left the reverse mortgage paperwork spread out like a play setting. Jason turned from the espresso machine, a sleek Italian thing that cost 2 months of my pension check. He looked at me, his expression flickering through annoyance before settling into something that resembled concern. Megan was seated with a coffee cup, her phone in her hand. She glanced down at me, then at the papers on the table. I gasped, my breath shallow, one arm flailing as if I were trying to reach for help. Jason stepped over my outstretched hand, his loafer inches from my fingers, careful not to touch me. He grabbed the folder with the mortgage documents and my unsigned quitclaim deed, then handed them to Megan. "Get these in the car," he said. "I'll deal with her." His voice was flat, the tone you might use for a misbehaving appliance. Then he stood over me, arms crossed, watching me struggle for air. His face was entirely still. He never called 911, he never knelt. He did not offer water or ask if I had my medication or even say my name. After a long minute my breathing steadied because I let it, and I let my eyes flutter open. I rasped that I must have fainted. Jason helped me up, his grip tight on my elbow, and he said, "You really need to stop all this drama, Mom. It's exhausting." The last splinter of a mother's hope disintegrated right there on that cold tile. Any residual family loyalty I had been clutching onto, any small voice that said maybe he was a victim of Megan's influence, evaporated. The boy I had raised was gone, replaced by a man who would step over a dying woman to protect his forged documents. I reported the incident to Martin that night. He had already been in touch with the district attorney's office, and the Elder Fraud Unit had assigned a detective named Sarah Tran to the case. She had been building a file based on my photographs and Diane's forensic report, and the staged collapse gave her the last piece of the puzzle. Evidence of active, ongoing coercion, right up to the moment of the attempted signing. The next afternoon, Jason and Megan told me we were going to the bank to finalize some estate paperwork. They had dressed me in a soft blue cardigan, the clothes of a grieving, trusting widow, and they walked me to the car with careful hands on my elbows. I let them. At the First Regional Bank branch, the loan officer who met us was a young woman named Claire, who had been briefed by Gerald Okonkwo. She smiled warmly and led us to a conference room where a camera was hidden in the smoke detector, and a microphone was wired into the table's central phone console. She laid out the final reverse mortgage documents, including the quitclaim deed that would strip my house from me, and the durable power of attorney that would hand them control of every account I owned. There was a line for my notarized signature, and a notary was already waiting in the lobby. Jason slid a pen toward me. "Just sign, Mom, this protects your future. You trust me, right?" His voice was oily calm, the same voice he had used when he was 12 and trying to explain why the cookie jar was empty. I picked up the pen. I held it for a long beat, let the silence stretch until Megan shifted in her chair. Then I set it down. "No," Megan's head snapped toward me. "What do you mean no? We've discussed this for weeks. This is what's best for you, you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clearer than I have in months," I said, my voice even. "I know about the gift deed. I know about the Fourplex. I know you forged your father's signature on the deed, sold the building for $320,000, and used that money to buy the condo you live in. I found the original forged document in your filing cabinet. I've been working with an attorney and the district attorney's office for the past month. You never deserved my pension and you will never get my house." Jason lunged across the table, his face blotched red. Megan grabbed for the pen as if she could force my hand to the page. But before either of them could reach me, the conference room door opened. Detective Sarah Tran stepped in with a uniformed officer, her badge clipped to her belt. Behind her came Martin Rourke and Gerald Okonkwo. Claire, the loan officer, pressed a silent button under the desk that locked the building's lobby and froze the elevators. Jason froze mid-lunge, his hand outstretched toward the deed. Megan let out a sound that was somewhere between a scream and a deflating balloon. Detective Tran read them their rights, her voice calm and procedural. "Jason Carmichael, you are under arrest for forgery, grand theft, elder abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud. Megan Carmichael, you are charged as an accomplice on all counts." The officer handcuffed them both, Jason first, his face cycling through rage, disbelief, and then a strange hollow blankness as he was led out through the bank service corridor. Megan kept repeating that there had been a mistake, that I was confused, that this was all a misunderstanding, until the door closed and her voice was swallowed by the building. I sat at the conference table for a long time after they were gone. Martin sat with me, and Claire brought me a cup of water. I did not feel triumphant. I felt hollow and sad and terribly tired. But I also felt something else, a slow, steady certainty that Bill was still with me, that the quiet architect of my future had laid the foundation for this moment long before his heart gave out. The criminal case moved faster than I expected. Jason and Megan were denied bail because the judge cited flight risk and the severity of the elder abuse charge. Their public defenders tried to argue that the documents were merely misunderstood family arrangements, but the physical evidence was overwhelming. The forged gift deed had been analyzed by a forensic document examiner, who testified that the signatures were crude simulations, not even good forgeries. The notary's expired license, the hard money lender's records, the reverse mortgage application, and the recorded audio from the bank conference room all painted a picture of a deliberate, sustained conspiracy. They eventually accepted a plea deal. Jason pleaded guilty to felony forgery and grand theft, Megan to conspiracy and elder abuse. They were sentenced to 12 years each with the possibility of parole after 6, though the parole board later denied early release due to the financial nature of the crime. Their assets, including the Harborview building and the ski boat, were subject to seizure under the state's forfeiture laws. The civil trial followed, and this is where the numbers truly told the story. Martin and Diane Kelso presented a meticulous paper trail that the jury could follow like a map. The forged gift deed had been recorded on a Tuesday. The sale of the Fourplex closed 11 days later. The wire transfer for $320,000 hit Jason and Megan's joint account on a Friday, and the cash purchase of the Harborview building was recorded the following Monday morning. Then the spiral began. The 18% hard money loan against the building, the maxed-out credit cards, the tax delinquency, the reverse mortgage plan targeting my house. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and returned with a fraud judgment of $350,000, covering the value of the Fourplex, statutory damages, legal fees, and a punitive multiplier for the elder abuse component. Jason and Megan could not pay. Their only significant asset was the Harborview building, which was still under the Bridge Rock hard money loan, with a balance of $147,000 and climbing. Because the building had been acquired with the direct proceeds of the fraud, the court granted my motion to seize and auction the property to satisfy the judgment. The auction was scheduled for a Tuesday morning on the courthouse steps, and I stood in the rain with my umbrella and a cashier's check in my pocket. The auctioneer, a weathered man in a yellow slicker, read the terms. The opening bid would cover the outstanding loan balance plus fees, starting at $147,000. Only a handful of bidders showed up because the building needed significant repairs, and the title had been clouded by the legal proceedings, making conventional financing impossible. I had saved what I could from Bill's small life insurance payout, a portion of my restored pension arrears, and the sale of some jewelry I never wore. I bid $155,000. No one else raised a paddle. The auctioneer called the sale 3 times, the gavel fell, and I became the sole owner of a waterfront building on Harborview Lane for less than half of what my son and his wife had paid for it with stolen money. After settling the Bridge Rock lien and the auction fees, I owned it free and clear. The circle had closed. I moved into the penthouse 2 weeks later. The floors needed refinishing, the wiring was outdated, and the windows leaked like sieves in a storm, but I had a cash cushion from the rental income I was about to start generating. I hired the same electrician Bill had used on the Fourplex, a taciturn man named Frank who remembered him and gave me a fair rate. I fixed the leaks, painted the walls a warm ivory, and planted geraniums on the rooftop deck. The lower unit, the guest suite where I had once been a prisoner in all but name, sat empty for a few months while I decided what to do with it. Then Jason and Megan were released on probation after their plea deal, their sentences partially suspended due to overcrowding in the state prison system. Their credit was destroyed, their assets seized, and no landlord in the county would rent to them with a fraud conviction on their record. They had burned every bridge and alienated every relative. One afternoon, Megan called me, actually crying this time, and said they had nowhere to go. I let the silence stretch before I answered. I offered them a 1-year lease on the lower unit. Full market rate, $2,400 a month, with first and last month's rent plus a security deposit equal to 1 month's rent due before move-in. I had Martin draft the lease ironclad, with a clause for immediate eviction on any late payment, and a stipulation that they maintain liability insurance naming me as an additional insured. They signed it without argument because they had no choice. Now every month I receive a check from Jason and Megan Carmichael. I cash it on the first of the month without fail. I record it in a ledger I keep in the same dented tin box that held Bill's warning. Some nights, I walk out onto the rooftop deck and look at the harbour, and I think about my husband. He was a quiet architect of my future even in death. He left me not with a grand confrontation, but with a trail of breadcrumbs that led straight to the truth. The forensic accountant, the title alert, the quiet title action he filed, all of it was his way of saying, I cannot be there, but I can leave you a map. I followed that map and it brought me here to a penthouse I own outright, with my name on the deed and my son's rent checks in my ledger. The moral of this, if I've learned anything, is that family is not a license to steal. Boundaries are not betrayal, and a little knowledge of double-entry bookkeeping, a lockpick you learned from your father, and a husband who loved you enough to plan for the worst, can be worth more than any inheritance. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? I'd like to hear your story in the comments. If you believe that integrity should never be sacrificed at the altar of family, click that like button and subscribe to this channel for more stories of justice served. I'll see you in the next one.